The house had grown quieter over the years, not because of peace but because of absence. Amara moved through the rooms like a shadow that no one noticed, her footsteps soft, her presence softer. Ryan was always somewhere else, inside meetings, buried in reports, or half asleep on the couch with his phone glowing in his hand. She had forgotten the last time he'd really looked at her, not in passing, not out of habit, but in that way that used to make her feel alive. What used to be warmth between them had turned into polite coexistence. Every conversation felt like duty, every gesture, rehearsed. On the morning he missed their anniversary again, she didn't cry or complain. She just stared at the flowers on the dining table, artificial, dust gathering at the edges, and thought about how much they resembled their marriage. She told him she needed a break, a few days away. He nodded, half listening, eyes still on an incoming email. There was no question, no resistance, no fear of losing her. That silence said everything she had tried to ignore for years. By the end of the week, Amara was on a flight to the coast, not for escape, but to remember what it felt like to breathe. The hotel was quiet, the sea vast and indifferent. She liked that. Here, she could exist without being someone's wife, without pretending to be fine. Days blended softly, mornings spent by the water, afternoons with coffee and books she barely read, nights spent staring at the horizon. The loneliness was still there, but it felt lighter when it wasn't shared. That was where she first saw him, Ethan. He wasn't remarkable at first glance, just another traveler with salt in his hair and a book in his hand. But there was something about his calm, an ease that contrasted sharply with Ryan's restless focus. They crossed paths at breakfast, at the lobby, on the beach. Each time, a nod became a greeting, then a brief exchange. His voice carried warmth that didn't demand attention. He asked simple questions and listened as if every answer mattered. It startled her, how easy it felt to speak without guarding her words. One evening, she found him sitting near the rocks, sketching the sunset. He gestured for her to join. They talked, not about love or loneliness, but about nothing and everything, places they had seen, books they never finished, moments they regretted not holding on to. She found herself laughing at things that weren't funny, realizing she hadn't laughed that way in years. He didn't flirt, didn't cross lines, just listened with a kind of focus that made her forget she was married. Over the next few days, the familiarity grew like a quiet rhythm. A shared coffee, a walk along the beach, a conversation that lingered too long. She began to notice small things, how his eyes caught the light, how his silence wasn't awkward but peaceful, how his presence filled the spaces inside her that had long gone hollow. Every evening ended with a goodbye that felt heavier than the last. Amara told herself it was harmless, two lonely people sharing air in the same place. But her heart knew better. It was the way her pulse quickened when he smiled, the way her thoughts drifted to him even when he wasn't near. She didn't plan it, she didn't want it. But desire doesn't ask for permission, it seeps quietly into cracks left open by neglect. One night, the ocean was particularly still, the sky a deep, endless blue. They walked without speaking, the sound of the waves the only thing between them. When his hand brushed against hers, she didn't move away. The world seemed to pause. Her breath caught, her body tense with both fear and longing. He didn't pull her closer, just looked at her as if asking a question he didn't need to speak. For a moment, everything inside her warped, loyalty, guilt, loneliness, need. Then she looked away, stepping back, but her silence betrayed her. Back in her room, she stared at her reflection, heart still racing. It wasn't love she felt, it was recognition. Someone had finally seen her again. That realization scared her more than the temptation itself. She told herself it would end when she returned home, that she would never see him again, that it was only a passing moment. But even then, deep down, she knew something inside her had already shifted. The woman who arrived at that resort was not the same one staring into the mirror now. She didn't know what she was searching for anymore, freedom, affection, or just proof that she was still capable of feeling something real. As the night deepened, Amara lay awake, listening to the faint hum of the sea beyond her window. Somewhere out there, she knew Ethan was probably awake too. And though nothing had happened yet, everything already had.
Days passed like unspoken sentences. Amir had started stepping outside more, returning later than usual. Hanya told herself it was work, but the faint smell of perfume on his shirt one evening told her otherwise. It wasn't her mother's fragrance, and it wasn't from home. That small discovery unsettled her more than she could explain. She didn't ask. She just watched. Every time he checked his phone, every faint smile he tried to hide, every pause before answering her simple questions, it all began to feel like quiet betrayal. It wasn't love she wanted from him, not the kind she could name, yet his distance felt like abandonment. Her chest carried a strange ache, one that mixed guilt with jealousy. Soj's visits became more frequent. She came with cooked meals, warm laughter, and stories meant to lighten the house. Amir seemed to welcome her presence. Hanya, however, watched from corners, saying little, answering politely when addressed. When Sadia complimented her, she forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She didn't like the sound of her father's laughter when Sadia spoke. It felt borrowed, like something that belonged to another time, another woman. After one such evening, Hanya entered the kitchen to find her father washing dishes alone. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, the tap running softly. He didn't notice her at first. She watched him for a moment, noticing how different he looked, alive, almost happy. She wanted to break that ease, to remind him of what they'd lost. Instead, she said quietly, "She comes here a lot now." He looked up, a bit startled, then nodded. "She's helping," he said simply. The words landed like stones. Helping. She turned away before he could see the expression on her face. That night, sleep refused to come. Her thoughts circled like restless birds. She thought of Sadia's hand brushing her father's arm when she laughed, how naturally he let it happen. She hated herself for caring, hated the way her stomach twisted at the image. She sat by the window again, watching the faint glow from his study. He hadn't turned off the light. She rose, walked down the hall, each step measured, careful. Through the half-open door, she saw him slump in the chair, asleep over open papers. His glasses tilted, his breathing deep. The lamplight fell softly across his face, outlining the tired lines beneath his eyes. For a moment, she only watched him. Then, almost without thought, she moved closer. Her fingers brushed the edge of the desk, then hesitated above his hair. The scent of his cologne mixed with the faint ink smell of the papers. She shouldn't have been there, but the stillness pulled her in. Her hand trembled as she pushed a strand of hair from his forehead. It was a gentle, fleeting gesture, nothing, and yet too much. She stood frozen afterward, her breath shallow, heart loud in the quiet room. Something broke inside her then, quietly, like glass cracking beneath cloth. She turned away before he stirred, before the wrongness could take shape, morning came heavy. He was quieter than usual, avoiding her gaze. She knew he had sensed something, maybe not fully, but enough. The silence between them grew sharp, dangerous. At breakfast, his hand brushed hers accidentally, and both of them froze. He pulled back quickly, clearing his throat, pretending to read the newspaper. She stared at the untouched food, her throat dry. Every word they didn't say pressed against her like a confession waiting to escape. Later that day, she overheard his voice through the half-open door. Sadia had come again. They were talking softly, but one sentence reached her clearly, Amr saying, "Maybe it's time I moved on." The words hit her like a slap. She stepped back, her breath caught. The thought of him starting over, sharing his mornings, his home, with someone else, it twisted her inside out. She didn't know why it hurt so much, only that it did. When Sadia left, the door closed gently, and Amir lingered in the hallway for a while. Hanya was waiting, pretending to dust the shelves. "You like her," she said, her voice too calm. He looked at her, confused by the tone. "She's a friend," he answered. She smiled faintly, though her hands trembled. "Friends don't make you forget who you were," she said, almost whispering. His face hardened. "Enough, Hanya," he said quietly, and walked away. Her eyes burned, not from tears, but from something deeper: rejection, shame, realization. She went to her room and closed the door, the sound of it echoing through the house. The scarf her mother had left on the chair lay there, folded neatly. She picked it up, pressed it to her face, breathing in the faint scent of the past. Then, without thinking, she carried it to the balcony and lit it. The fabric curled, blackened, and turned to ash. The flames reflected in her eyes. Flickering with guilt and defiance, she watched the last piece burn out, her voice breaking softly in the wind. "You left him alone for too long." The words weren't meant for anyone, yet they felt like a confession inside. Amir stood in the hallway, looking at the faint glow from the balcony. He didn't move toward it. Maybe he knew, maybe he didn't. The distance between them had become something unfixable, filled with feelings neither could admit. That night, neither of them spoke. The house was utterly still, holding the weight of what neither could name. The air between their rooms felt charged, almost alive, heavy with tension and regret. When Hanya finally closed her eyes, her last thought wasn't of Sadia or her mother, it was of her father's hand on the table that morning, the way it had pulled back from hers, as if touch itself had become dangerous. And that unspoken distance, something inside her broke fully, not with sound, but with surrender.